An MMA coach slaps a boy for saying, "My dad's a black belt," humiliating the 12-year-old in front of his entire first martial arts class. The arrogant instructor screams that daddy's credentials don't matter in his gym, while other students watch in stunned silence. But the hooded figure hammering the heavy bag in the corner isn't just another gym member. This is Mike Tyson himself. The coach has no idea he just assaulted a child in front of the most feared heavyweight champion in boxing history, a man who spent decades destroying bullies with his bare hands. The gym falls dead silent as Iron Mike slowly removes his gloves and turns around, his legendary voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The instructor's face drains of color as he realizes who's been watching his pathetic display of power, while the terrified boy looks up at his unexpected savior. Other gym members step back, knowing they're about to witness the kind of justice that only legends can deliver. What happens when you pick on the wrong kid in front of the wrong champion? Will the bully survive learning why Mike Tyson earned his fearsome reputation? What happened next would terrorize the coach for the rest of his miserable life. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra. Special for you. Bobby Martinez clutched the crumpled flyer against his chest as he stood outside Steele's elite MMA academy. The faded paper promised free trial classes in bold letters, but the imposing glass doors made his stomach twist with nerves. At 12 years old and barely 95 pounds, Bobby felt even smaller as he watched teenagers through the windows executing kicks that looked impossibly high. His worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floors as he entered the gym's atmosphere hit him like a wave. Expensive equipment gleaming under bright lights, trophy cases lined with championship belts, and the constant thud of fists against heavy bags. Everything screamed money and success, two things his family desperately lacked. "You must be Bobby," said a kind voice. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with gentle eyes, smiled at him from behind the front desk. "I'm Cindy Walsh. Your dad called about the trial class." Bobby nodded, unable to find his voice. Through the glass partition, he could see students, his age moving with confidence he'd never felt. Their gear looked fresh from the store, while his borrowed shorts hung loose around his waist. "Coach Vaughn can be tough on beginners," Cindy warned softly, glancing toward the main training floor. "But don't let him scare you. You've got as much right to be here as anyone." She handed him a waiver and pointed toward the changing room. "Go get ready. Class starts in 5 minutes." Bobby's hands trembled as he signed his name. His father had saved for months just to afford this one trial class. Jimmy Martinez worked double shifts at the security company and picked up weekend mechanic jobs, all while caring for Bobby's mother through her cancer treatments. The least Bobby could do was tee or wide-eye in the changing room. Bobby pulled on the borrowed gear Cindy had provided. The older boys ignored him, talking about techniques and tournaments he'd never heard of. Their confidence made him feel like an imposter. When he stepped onto the main training floor, the sounds of the gym washed over him. The sharp crack of kicks against pads, the rhythmic thuds from the heavy bags, and underneath it all, a deeper pounding that seemed to shake the building itself. In the far corner, a large figure in a gray hoodie worked a bag with methodical precision, each impact echoing like thunder. Coach Derek Vaughn stood in the center of the mat, his muscular frame covered in tattoos, championship belts displayed prominently on the wall behind him. His cold eyes swept across the assembled students like a predator sizing up prey. The whistle shrieked, cutting through the noise. "New meat." Vaughn's voice boomed across the gym. Front and center. Bobby's legs felt like rubber as he walked to the center of the mat. Every eye in the gym focused on him, and he could feel his cheeks burning with embarrassment. Coach Vaughn circled him slowly, like a shark testing the waters. "Let's see what Daddy taught you," Vaughn sneered, his voice carrying across the silent gym. "Show me your stance." Bobby tried to remember the basic positions he'd seen in online videos, spreading his feet and raising his hands. The other students snickered at his awkward form. "Pathetic," Vaughn announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at this, class. This is what happens when parents don't know the first thing about real fighting." He grabbed Bobby's arm and twisted it into a different position, applying just enough pressure to hurt. "Feet wider. Hands higher. Stop looking like a scared rabbit." Bobby gritted his teeth and adjusted his stance. The position felt unnatural and uncomfortable, but he held it despite the burning in his legs. Better, but still garbage, Vaughn continued. His assault. Let's see a basic front kick. And don't embarrass yourself more than you already have. Bobby lifted his right leg and tried to push forward the way he'd seen in movies. His balance wavered, and he stumbled backward, nearly falling. The laughter from the other students cut deeper than any physical pain. Unbelievable. Vaughn exploded, his face reddening. You move like a cripple. This is what happens when Daddy doesn't know how to raise a warrior. The words hit Bobby like a slap. His father wasn't crippled. He was a hero who'd sacrificed his body serving his country. Fighting back tears, Bobby found his voice. My dad's not a cripple, he said quietly. He was a Marine. He earned his black belt before he got hurt protecting people. Vaughn's expression shifted from mockery to rage. The gym fell completely silent. Even the rhythmic pounding from the corner heavy bag stopped abruptly. I don't care if your daddy's Chuck Norris himself, Vaughn snarled, stepping closer. Daddy's belt don't mean squat in my gym. The backhand came so fast Bobby didn't see it until stars exploded across his vision. The force knocked him to the ground, his cheek stinging where Vaughn's hand had connected. He lay there for a moment, stunned and humiliated, tasting blood where he'd bitten his tongue. The gym remained frozen in shocked silence. Even the other students stopped laughing, sensing something had crossed a line. In the corner, the hooded figure slowly removed his boxing gloves and turned around. The hood fell back, revealing a face that made every person in the gym stop breathing. Mike Tyson's dark eyes fixed on Derek Vaughn with an intensity that could melt steel. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. You just hit a child. The transformation in the gym's atmosphere was instant and electric. Students whispered his name in awe and terror. Even Cindy at the front desk leaned forward, recognizing the legend who'd been training quietly in their midst. Vaughn's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, naked fear. He'd just assaulted a 12-year-old boy in front of the most feared heavyweight champion in boxing history. Mr. Tyson, Vaughn stammered, his voice cracking. This kid was being disrespectful. Disrespectful. Tyson's eyebrows rose slightly. He didn't raise his voice or move aggressively, but his presence filled the entire gym with tension. In my day, a man who hits a kid for speaking about his father ain't much of a man at all. Cindy appeared beside Bobby, helping him sit up and gently checking his reddened cheek. Bobby stared up at Tyson in amazement, hardly believing that Iron Mike himself had witnessed his humiliation. Tyson approached with measured steps, his gaze never leaving Vaughn's face. This boy came here looking for respect, looking to learn. You gave him violence instead of wisdom. I run a tough gym. Vaughn tried to defend himself, but his voice was barely a whisper. These kids need discipline. Discipline? Tyson's laugh was cold. You think slapping children is discipline? That's not strength, coach. That's fear. You're afraid this boy might be tougher than you think. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Every person in the gym understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. A moment when a true champion stood up for someone who couldn't defend himself. Tyson stopped 3 feet from Vaughn, close enough that the coach had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. When Iron Mike spoke again, his words carried the quiet menace that had made him a legend. Now, you're going to do what real men do when they make mistakes. His voice was so calm it was terrifying. You're going to apologize to this boy. And you're going to mean it. Vaughn's hands shook as he looked down at Bobby, then back at Tyson. The gym held its collective breath. Apologize to the boy, Tyson repeated, even more quietly than before. Now, 30 minutes later, the main training floor had returned to its normal rhythm, but everything felt different. Bobby sat on a bench near the locker room, still processing what had happened. Vaughn had apologized, stuttering and awkward, but genuine in his fear, and offered Bobby free classes for a month. Now the coach avoided even looking in their direction. Mike Tyson approached Bobby with a towel draped around his neck, his manner completely transformed from the intimidating force he'd been earlier. When he sat down beside the boy, his voice was gentle. You okay, son? Bobby nodded, touching his cheek gingerly. Yes, sir. Thank you for standing up for me. Your father sounds like a good man, Tyson said, his eyes kind. Marines fight for something bigger than themselves. That's real strength. Not what that fool was showing you. He got hurt in Afghanistan, Bobby said quietly. People at school sometimes say mean things about him limping, but he's the strongest person I know. Tyson nodded thoughtfully. I grew up angry, you know. Angry at the world, angry at people who had more than me. Took me a long time to learn that real strength ain't about hurting people weaker than you. It's about protecting them. Bobby looked up at him with wide eyes. You were angry? Furious, Tyson admitted with a slight smile. But discipline saved me. Training saved me. Learning to respect others, even when they didn't respect me. That's what made me a champion. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to his contact information. Here's my number. Have your father call me if you need anything. A Marine who raised a boy with enough courage to stand up for his family. I'd like to meet him. Bobby took the number with trembling hands, treating it like precious treasure. Really? Really? Tyson stood and ruffled Bobby's hair. Keep your head up, kid. You got heart. That's something nobody can teach. As Bobby collected his things and headed for the exit, he passed Tyson returning to the heavy bag. The champion's presence had completely changed the gym's atmosphere. Students trained with more focus, less showing off. Even the air felt cleaner. Bobby walked to the bus stop with his shoulders straighter than they'd been in months. His cheeks still stung, but something had changed inside him. He clutched Mike Tyson's phone number in his pocket, knowing his father would never believe this story. Across the street, two men in a black sedan watched him board the bus. The driver made a phone call as the bus pulled away. The Marine's kid was at the gym today, he said quietly. Tyson was there too. We might have a problem. Bobby burst through the apartment door at 6 o'clock, his excitement overriding the lingering sting in his cheek. The modest two-bedroom felt warm and welcoming after the intimidating gym, filled with the smell of his father's cooking and the soft sounds of his mother resting on the couch. Dad, Mom, you're never going to believe what happened. Jimmy Martinez looked up from the stove where he was stirring a pot of rice, his weathered face creasing with concern as he noticed the redness on his son's cheek. At 38, Jimmy still carried himself with military bearing despite the slight limp from shrapnel that had torn through his left leg in Kandahar. What happened to your face? Jimmy's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd led Marines through firefights. That's the crazy part, Bobby said, practically vibrating with energy. This coach hit me, but then Mike Tyson, the real Mike Tyson, made him apologize. Linda Martinez struggled to sit up straighter on the couch, her thin frame wrapped in a soft blanket. Cancer had stolen her strength, but not the fierce love in her dark eyes. Someone hit you. Bobby launched into the complete story, his words tumbling over each other as he described Vaughn's cruelty and Tyson's intervention. Jimmy's hands slowly clenched into fists as he listened, the old Marine's protective instincts flaring. Mike Tyson was really there? Linda asked, managing a weak smile at her son's enthusiasm. He gave me his phone number, Bobby said, pulling out the crumpled paper like it was made of gold. He said you should call him, Dad. He wants to meet you. Jimmy took the number with reverence, hardly believing his eyes. Iron Mike Tyson wants to meet me? He said Marines fight for something bigger than themselves. Bobby recited carefully. He called that real strength. That evening, after Bobby had gone to bed, Jimmy made the call. Tyson's voice was warm and respectful as they talked about Bobby's courage and Jimmy's service. When Jimmy mentioned their financial struggles and Linda's treatments, Tyson's tone grew thoughtful. Your boy's got heart, Tyson said. Any Marine who raised a kid like that is someone worth knowing. After they hung up, Jimmy sat in his small kitchen calculating bills on scraps of paper. Linda's next round of treatments would cost more than he made in 3 months. His VA disability barely covered their basic expenses, and his night security job paid minimum wage. The phone rang at 11:30. The voice was unfamiliar but confident. Jimmy Martinez? I hear you're a man who knows how to fight. Who is this? Someone who can solve your money problems. One night, 5 fights, 10,000 cash. No questions asked. Jimmy's grip tightened on the phone. I'm not interested. Your wife's medical bills say otherwise. Think about it, Marine. Pride don't cure cancer. The line went dead, leaving Jimmy staring at the phone in the darkness. The warehouse complex where Jimmy worked nights felt lonelier than usual as he made his rounds the next evening. The security job paid barely above minimum wage, but it was steady work that didn't aggravate his injured leg too much. He was checking the locks on Building C when footsteps echoed across the empty parking lot. Derek. Vaughn emerged from the shadows, looking uncomfortable and nervous. Gone was the arrogant coach from the gym, replaced by a man who'd clearly been humbled. Martinez. Vaughn's voice was hesitant. I wanted to apologize again about your boy. What I did was wrong. Jimmy studied him carefully, every instinct from 2 tours in Afghanistan telling him this wasn't a social visit. Apology accepted. What do you really want? Vaughn glanced around the empty lot before stepping closer. I know about your situation. Your wife, the medical bills, trying to make ends meet on security wages. My family's business is my own. Look, I'm not proud of what I'm about to say, but there's money to be made if you're willing to use those Marine combat skills. Vaughn pulled out a business card. Underground fighting. Former military, law enforcement, guys like us who know how to handle themselves. Jimmy's jaw tightened. I don't fight for money anymore. It's not like you think, Vaughn pressed. These aren't street brawls. Organized matches, wealthy spectators who bet big money. Everyone's a professional, nobody gets seriously hurt. Just like the old bare-knuckle days. And if I say no? Vaughn shrugged. Your choice. But that experimental treatment your wife needs? The one insurance won't cover? This could pay for it in one night. Jimmy stared at the card, feeling the weight of impossible choices. How much? Depends on how many fights you take, how well you do. Good fighters make 10, 15,000 a night. Great fighters make more. The number hit Jimmy like a physical blow. More than he made in 6 months of security work. Think about it, Vaughn said, backing away. Your wife's treatments won't pay for themselves. Pride don't cure cancer. The same words from last night's phone call. Jimmy watched Vaughn disappear into the darkness, the business card burning in his fingers. At home, Linda lay sleeping, her breathing shallow and labored. The medical bills on their kitchen table might as well have been ransom notes. Jimmy picked up the card 3 times before dawn, but couldn't bring himself to make the call. 3 days later, Jimmy's world collapsed in the time it took for Linda to fall unconscious in their kitchen. The ambulance ride to University Medical Center passed in a blur of sirens and paramedics checking vital signs. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room, Dr. Sarah Chun delivered the verdict with professional compassion. Her condition has deteriorated faster than we expected, she explained, reviewing Linda's chart. There's an experimental treatment protocol that could help, but it requires immediate intervention. How much? Jimmy asked, though he already knew the answer would destroy them. $15,000 up front. Insurance will cover some of the follow-up care, but not the initial treatment. Jimmy stared at his wife's pale face as machines monitored her breathing. $15,000 might as well have been $15 million. He squeezed Linda's hand and stepped into the hallway to make the call he'd been dreading. Vincent Romano, the smooth voice answered. This is Jimmy Martinez. I need to talk about those fights. I was wondering when you'd call, Marine. Your wife's in the hospital, isn't she? Jimmy's blood ran cold. How do you? I make it my business to know about potential fighters. One match, Saturday night. Win or lose. You walk away with enough to cover those medical bills. The deal felt like selling his soul, but Linda's labored breathing echoed from the hospital room. One fight. That's all. That's all you need. Someone will contact you with details. Jimmy returned to Linda's bedside and lied smoothly about picking up extra security work. She was too weak to question him closely, accepting his explanation. With the trust of 18 years of marriage, that night, he cleared space in their garage and pulled the dusty, heavy bag from its corner. His fists felt rusty against the leather, but muscle memory returned quickly. The old combinations flowed: jab, cross, hook, uppercut, while images of Linda in that hospital bed drove him harder. Dad. Bobby appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Just working out, son. Go back to bed. Can I watch? Maybe you could teach me some real moves. Jimmy looked at his son's eager face and made a decision. If he was going to fight, Bobby should at least learn to protect himself properly. Grab those smaller gloves. Time you learned what your old man knows. Saturday afternoon brought unseasonably cool weather to Las Vegas, and Jimmy was grateful for it as he worked through combinations in the garage. His body felt better than it had in years, the intensive training having awakened sleeping muscles and sharpened dulled reflexes. Bobby was getting the hang of basic footwork when unexpected footsteps echoed in their driveway. Mike Tyson appeared. in the garage entrance, wearing his trademark gray hoodie and a concerned expression. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Tyson said, his presence immediately filling the small space. "Thought I'd check on you both." "Mr. Tyson." Bobby dropped into a fighting stance, eager to show off what he'd learned. Tyson smiled and observed their training, offering subtle corrections to Bobby's form and nodding approvingly at Jimmy's technique. But his experienced eyes picked up on something else: the desperate intensity in Jimmy's movements, the way he attacked the heavy bag like it owed him money. "You fighting somewhere?" Tyson asked casually. Jimmy's punch faltered slightly. "Just staying in shape." "Uh-huh." Tyson's tone remained neutral, but Jimmy could feel those dark eyes reading him like an open book. "Well, if you ever need anything at all, you call me. Marines take care of each other." After Tyson left, Jimmy tried to shake the feeling that the champion knew more than he was saying. That evening, he drove to the warehouse address Romano had provided, his stomach churning with nerves and guilt. The building looked abandoned from the outside, but expensive cars filled the hidden parking area. Jimmy entered through a side door and found himself in a different world: professional lighting, camera equipment, and a regulation-sized fighting ring surrounded by well-dressed spectators. From the shadows across the parking lot, Mike Tyson watched through binoculars, his instincts having led him to follow Jimmy. Something wasn't right about the Marines' behavior, and Tyson's street-smart intuition rarely failed him. That Jimmy's opponent was a former prison boxer named Carl "Crusher" Davidson, all muscle and scars with dead eyes that had seen too much violence. The fight was brutal, but Jimmy's military training gave him the edge. He won by split decision, earning $2,500 and Romano's respect. As Jimmy collected his money, Romano's lieutenant handed him an envelope. Inside were photographs: Bobby walking to school, Linda at the hospital, Jimmy at work. "Insurance policy," Romano explained via video call from an undisclosed location. "Your family's safe as long as you keep fighting for us. Try to leave, and everyone learns about your illegal activities. The VA might be very interested to know how their disabled veteran is really making money." Outside in the parking lot, Tyson lowered his binoculars and reached for his phone. This was bigger than one desperate father, and it was about to get very dangerous. Jimmy's hands still trembled from adrenaline as he exited the warehouse, the envelope of cash feeling heavier than it should. The $2,500 could cover Linda's next round of treatments, but the victory felt hollow against the weight of what he'd just done. Two men emerged from behind a black Escalade. Brad Kowalski, a thick-necked enforcer with prison tattoos covering his forearms, and Steve Burton, smaller but meaner, with the dead eyes of a career criminal. They moved to flank Jimmy, cutting off his path to his truck. "Nice work tonight, Marine," Kowalski said, pulling out a manila envelope. "Boss wants to make sure you understand the new arrangement." Jimmy's stomach dropped as they spread photographs across the Escalade's hood. Bobby walking to school, Linda entering the hospital, Jimmy himself at the security company. Every image was recent, detailed, invasive. "Your family's real photogenic," Burton sneered. "Be a shame if something happened to disrupt their routine." "I kept my end of the deal," Jimmy said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "Deals changed," Kowalski replied, producing a contract. 6 more fights over the next 2 months. "You try to back out, these photos go to the VA. The police, your wife's doctors. Ever wonder what happens when they find out their disability recipient is making money in underground fights?" Jimmy reached for the contract, knowing he had no choice, when a voice cut through the night like a blade. "Gentlemen, I think this conversation is over." Mike Tyson stepped out of the shadows, his gray hoodie making him nearly invisible until now. The parking lot's security lights cast harsh angles across his face, transforming him into something primal and dangerous. Kowalski laughed nervously. "Mind your own business, old man. This is between us and the Marine." "Wrong answer." Tyson exploded into motion with the same devastating speed that had made him a legend. His right uppercut caught Kowalski under the chin, lifting the bigger man off his feet before sending him crashing into the Escalade side panel. Burton fumbled for something in his jacket, but Tyson's left hook caught him in the temple, spinning him like a top before he collapsed face first onto the asphalt. The entire confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. Both men lay unconscious, their threats scattered to the wind along with their photographs. "You okay?" Tyson asked, checking Jimmy for injuries. Jimmy stared at the two motionless figures, hardly believing what he'd witnessed. "How did you? Why are you here?" "Same reason I was at that gym," Tyson said simply. "Some things are worth fighting for. Your family's one of them." He helped Jimmy gather the scattered photos, then guided him toward his truck. "We need to talk. And your wife and boy need to know what's really happening." The Martinez apartment felt smaller with Mike Tyson sitting at their kitchen table, but his presence brought an odd sense of security. Linda, despite her weakness, had insisted on making coffee for their unexpected guest, while Bobby sat transfixed by the boxing legend in their modest home. "Tell me everything," Tyson said quietly, his eyes moving between Jimmy and Linda. Jimmy explained the mounting medical bills, the experimental treatment, and Romano's organization. Linda listened with growing horror as she realized the danger her husband had put himself in for her sake. $15,000, she whispered. "Jimmy, you should have told me." "I can handle Romano," Jimmy insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "No, you can't," Tyson said bluntly. "These people don't play games. I've seen organizations like this before. They eat good men alive." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "I know people who can provide security for Linda and Bobby. And I've got connections in legitimate fighting circles who'd sponsor a veteran with your skills." "I can't ask you to," Jimmy began. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Linda's breathing became labored, and within minutes they were racing back to the hospital. In the harsh emergency room lights, Dr. Chin delivered devastating news. Linda's condition had worsened dramatically. The experimental treatment needed to begin immediately, but the cost had jumped to $25,000. Jimmy felt his world crumbling. Even with tonight's winnings, they were still impossibly short. "I'll cover it," Tyson said without hesitation. "No," Jimmy's Marine pride flared. "I won't take charity." "It's not charity, it's—" Jimmy's phone rang, cutting off their argument. Romano's smooth voice filled the room as Jimmy reluctantly answered. "Congratulations on your victory tonight, Marine. Unfortunately, you cost me 2 valuable employees. That debt just got bigger. What do you want?" 6 more fights, as planned. But now the stakes are higher. Refuse, and those photos go public. Your disability benefits disappear, your family loses everything." Tyson held out his hand. "Give me the phone." Jimmy hesitated, then handed it over. "Romano." Tyson's voice carried deadly calm. "This is Mike Tyson. We need to talk." The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Romano laughed. "Iron Mike himself. I'm honored. But this doesn't concern you. You made it my concern when you threatened a Marine's family." "Back off." "I don't think so. Your friend owes me, and debts get paid one way or another." Tyson's jaw tightened. "Then we'll settle this face to face." "Looking forward to it," Romano replied before the line went dead. The next morning found them at Marcus Tank Johnson's private gym on the outskirts of Vegas. The former heavyweight contender had transformed an old warehouse into a fighter's paradise. Regulation rings, pristine equipment, and walls lined with photographs from boxing's golden era. "Mike Tyson bringing me students," Tank grinned, his massive frame still imposing at 55. "Must be special." "They are," Tyson confirmed, watching Bobby stare wide-eyed at a signed photo of Ollie. "This boy's got heart, and his father's got the skills to be something special." Tank nodded approvingly as he watched Jimmy work the heavy bag. The Marine's combinations crisp despite his unconventional training background. Military combat training's different from boxing, but the fundamentals are solid. "Could work with this." Tyson began training them both, sharing stories from his own troubled youth as they worked. "I was angry at everything when I was young," he told Bobby during water breaks. "Angry at being poor, angry at being different. Took me years to learn that real strength comes from protecting people, not hurting them." Bobby absorbed every word. While practicing defensive footwork, his confidence growing with each session. Jimmy found himself remembering why he'd loved martial arts before the military, before injuries and responsibilities had pushed fighting into the past. "I know promoters who'd be interested in a veteran with a compelling story," Tank mentioned. During a brief rest. "Legitimate fights, proper medical supervision, good money for the right fighter." For the first time in days, Jimmy felt hope. Maybe there was a way out of Romano's web that didn't involve compromise or charity. Their training session was interrupted when Detective Maria Santos entered the gym, her sharp eyes taking in the scene with professional interest. She wore a conservative business suit that couldn't quite hide her athletic build, and her badge hung from a chain around her neck. "Jimmy Martinez?" she asked, approaching their group. "I'm Detective Santos, LVPD. I need to speak with you about Vincent." "Romano." Jimmy's blood turned to ice. Tank and Tyson exchanged glances, both men recognizing the gravity of law enforcement involvement. "Am I under arrest?" Jimmy asked. "That depends," Santos replied, pulling out a thick folder. "On whether you're willing to help me put Romano away for good." Detective Santos spread crime scene photos across Tank's desk like dealing cards, each image more disturbing than the last. Beaten fighters, abandoned warehouses, and hospital records painted a picture of systematic violence disguised as entertainment. "Romano's organization spans 5 states," she explained, her voice professional but tinged with anger. "We estimate they generate over $10 million annually through illegal betting and streaming. But it's not just about money. They're destroying lives." She pulled out missing person reports, each file representing a fighter who'd tried to leave the circuit. Marcus Chun, former Navy SEAL, disappeared after winning 12 straight fights and demanding his release. Tony Vasquez, ex-Army Ranger, last seen 3 months ago after threatening to expose the operation. Jimmy studied the photos, recognizing the desperation in each fighter's eyes. "What happened to them?" "We don't know. That's why I need your help." Santos revealed Romano's background. Vincent Romano Jr., son of a deceased crime family associate, trying to build his own empire in his father's shadow. He's smart, careful, and completely ruthless. Traditional investigation methods haven't worked. "You want me to go back in there," Jimmy said, understanding the implications. "With federal immunity and witness protection guarantees. One more fight, enough to gather evidence that will bring down the entire network." Jimmy shook his head immediately. "Too dangerous." "If he suspects, what if you weren't alone?" Tyson interrupted, his mind already working through possibilities. Santos turned to him with interest. "What are you thinking?" "I go in as his trainer," Tyson said. "Mike Thompson, former fighter, down on his luck. Romano's ego won't let him pass up the chance to add Iron Mike Tyson to his stable, even if he doesn't know it's really me." "Absolutely not," Jimmy protested. "I won't put you at risk for my problems. These stopped being just your problems when Romano threatened your family." Tyson replied firmly. "Besides, I've been in tougher spots than some wannabe crime boss." Santos considered the proposal, her tactical mind weighing risks and benefits. It could work. Romano's arrogant enough to believe he can control anyone through leverage. But if he discovers your real identity, he won't, Tyson said with quiet confidence. "I've been Mike Thompson before, broke trainer trying to make a comeback. Just need to sell the desperation." Santos pulled out recording equipment and legal documents. "Federal witness protection for your entire family, full immunity from prosecution, and a new identity if necessary. All contingent on gathering enough evidence to ensure convictions." Jimmy looked at his wife's medical bills, at Bobby's hopeful face, at the photos of missing fighters. Every choice led through darkness, but at least this path offered light at the end. "One fight," he agreed. "But we do this my way, no unnecessary risks." Santos smiled grimly. "Mr. Thompson, welcome to the team." Tank's gym felt different the next morning, transformed from a training facility into a planning headquarters. Detective Santos had spread blueprints, surveillance photos, and legal documents across every available surface, while Tyson studied Romano's operation with the strategic mind that had made him a champion. "The key is selling your desperation," Santos explained to Tyson, adjusting a miniature recording device disguised as a button on his worn leather jacket. "Romano preys on people who need money badly enough to compromise their principles." Tyson nodded, slipping into character. "Mike Thompson, former trainer who got blackballed for fixing fights. Lost everything. Need cash to pay off gambling debts." His voice changed subtly, taking on the defeated tone of a man who'd fallen from grace. "Perfect," Santos said, impressed by the transformation. "These devices record everything within 20 feet and transmit to our surveillance van. Federal court requires clear audio evidence of criminal conspiracy, so get them talking about the organization's structure and financing. Jimmy studied photographs of Romano's known associates, memorizing faces and names. What about exit strategy? If this goes wrong, it won't, Tyson interrupted, but his eyes showed he understood the stakes. Romano's ego is his weakness. He'll want to show off for Iron Mike Tyson, even if he doesn't know that's who I really am. Santos handed Jimmy a contact number. Call Derek Vaughn. Tell him you need another fight urgently. Mention your new trainer has connections in the underground scene. Vaughn's scared enough of both of you to make it happen quickly. The call went exactly as predicted. Vaughn's voice trembled slightly as he agreed to arrange a meeting with Romano, clearly still intimidated by his previous encounter with Tyson. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, Vaughn reported. Romano wants to meet at his restaurant. Says he's intrigued by your trainer's reputation. After Vaughn hung up, Santos reviewed their cover story one final time. You're desperate for money because Linda's treatments have bankrupted you. Mike Thompson is your last hope for making real cash in. The underground circuit. Keep it simple. Desperate people don't overthink their lies. Jimmy watched Tyson practice his defeated persona, hunching his shoulders and letting his voice carry the weight of imagined failures. The transformation was unsettling. Iron Mike Tyson disappearing behind the mask of a broken man. You sure about this? Jimmy asked quietly. Tyson straightened for a moment, his real personality shining through. Your family's worth the risk. Besides, Romano has no idea what he's really dealing with. Santos gathered her equipment, satisfaction evident in her professional demeanor. Gentlemen, tomorrow night we end Vincent Romano's career in organized crime. As they prepared to leave, Tank pulled Jimmy aside. Watch Tyson's back in there. Man's got more heart than sense sometimes. Jimmy nodded, understanding that their success depended on protecting each other, and that Romano was about to meet two men who'd never learned how to quit. That Vinny's place occupied a corner building in downtown Las Vegas, its neon sign casting red shadows across expensive cars parked along the street. The restaurant's facade suggested upscale Italian dining, but Jimmy noticed the subtle signs of something more: security cameras at every angle, windows tinted too dark for casual dining, and patrons who looked more like bodyguards than customers. Remember, Tyson muttered as they approached the entrance, his shoulders hunched in his Mike Thompson persona. I'm desperate. You're my meal ticket. The interior confirmed Jimmy's suspicions, while the front dining room buzzed with legitimate customers. Armed men in expensive suits guided them toward a private back section. The real business happened behind soundproofed walls lined with computer screens showing betting odds and fighter statistics. Vincent Romano commanded the room. From behind a massive mahogany desk, his silver hair perfectly styled and cold blue eyes assessing every detail of his visitors. At 52, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a fight that mattered. Jimmy Martinez. Romano stood with practiced charm, extending a manicured hand. Your reputation precedes you. And this must be the famous Mike Thompson. Tyson shuffled forward, playing his role perfectly. Mr. Romano, heard you run a classy operation here. The classiest, Romano confirmed, studying Tyson with predatory interest. Tell me about your background, Thompson. Vaughn says. You know the underground scene. Been around. Tyson mumbled, avoiding eye contact convincingly. Trained some good fighters back in the day. Before I made some bad choices, lost some fights I shouldn't have lost. Romano's smile sharpened. Ah, a man who understands that sometimes business requires flexible ethics. I appreciate honesty. He led them to a wall of monitors displaying live feeds from fighting venues across multiple states. This is what real money looks like, gentlemen. Private clients betting millions per event, exclusive streaming to international audiences. We're not talking about backyard brawls. This is professional entertainment for discerning clientele. Jimmy watched Romano's pride as he explained the operation's scope, each word being recorded by Santos' hidden devices. The man couldn't resist, showing off his criminal empire. Your next fight is Thursday, Romano announced, returning to his desk. Consider it an audition for bigger opportunities. Win impressively, and we'll discuss a long-term arrangement. As they prepared to leave, Romano's lieutenant emerged from the shadows. A massive man whose scarred face and dead eyes spoke of countless violent encounters. Marcus, the butcher, Walsh stood 6'4" and carried himself like a weapon waiting to be used. Thompson, Walsh's voice was gravel and rust. You look familiar. Real familiar. Tyson maintained his defeated posture, but Jimmy caught the subtle tension in his mentor's shoulders. Get that a lot. Got one of those faces, I guess. Walsh stepped closer, studying Tyson's features with unsettling intensity. I've seen you fight before. Different name, maybe different circumstances, but I never forget a fighter's stance. Must be thinking of someone else, Tyson replied, but his voice carried a slight edge. Romano intervened before Walsh could probe further. Marcus gets paranoid about new people. Professional hazard in our business. As they walked to their car, Jimmy felt Walsh's eyes following them through the restaurant's tinted windows. He knows, Jimmy whispered. Suspects, Tyson corrected. But suspicion ain't proof. Yet, the warehouse in North Las Vegas looked abandoned from the outside, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls suggesting urban decay. But the steady stream of luxury vehicles turning into the hidden rear entrance told a different story, and Jimmy's stomach churned as he recognized the sophistication of Romano's operation. Inside, the transformation was complete. Professional lighting rigs illuminated a regulation-sized fighting ring. Multiple camera angles captured every moment for streaming to wealthy international audiences, and 200 spectators in expensive clothing filled temporary bleachers. Around the combat area, impressive setup, Tyson muttered, his hidden recording device capturing every detail as they moved through the crowd. Romano appeared at their side, his satisfaction evident as he gestured toward the technical equipment. Clients pay premium prices for premium entertainment. Tonight's event is streaming live to private parties in 12 countries. Jimmy tried to focus on gathering evidence while warming up for his fight, but the venue's professional atmosphere made his illegal participation feel more real and more dangerous. This wasn't a desperate street fight. This was organized crime. On an international scale, his opponent entered the ring to enthusiastic applause. Carl Crusher Davidson looked even more dangerous than their first encounter, his prison-built physique covered in scars that told stories of countless violent encounters. Dead eyes studied Jimmy with professional disinterest. Davidson's undefeated. In 15 underground fights, Romano announced to the crowd, our Marine friend is about to learn why. The fight was brutal from the opening bell. Davidson fought with prison rules. No mercy, no quarter, and maximum damage with every exchange. But Jimmy's military training and Tyson's coaching gave him advantages the convict hadn't expected. Superior footwork, tactical thinking, and disciplined combinations allowed Jimmy to weather the early storm and begin taking control. By the third round, Jimmy had established dominance. His left hook opened a cut over Davidson's eye, and his body shots were taking their toll. The crowd's enthusiasm shifted as they realized the newcomer might actually win. The final bell brought a split decision victory for Jimmy, earning him $5,000 and Romano's genuine respect. Impressive performance, Romano said, leading them to his private office behind the ring. Ready to discuss that long-term arrangement? He spread a contract across his desk, 10 fights over 6 months for $100,000 total. The money would solve every financial problem the Martinez family faced, but the exclusivity clauses and penalty conditions made Jimmy's blood run cold. Your wife needs that experimental treatment in Switzerland, doesn't she? Romano's smile was predatory. This contract covers everything, plus living expenses while you're fighting for me. Jimmy reached for the contract, knowing he had no choice, when Detective Santos' voice crackled through his hidden earpiece. We have enough evidence. Get out now. But as Jimmy hesitated, Romano's expression shifted to cold suspicion. Problem, Marine? Jimmy's hand froze inches from the contract as Romano's eyes narrowed with predatory intelligence. The warehouse office suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous, as if the walls were closing in around them. Just want to make sure I understand the terms, Jimmy said, stalling desperately while Santos' voice continued crackling through his hidden earpiece. Abort immediately. We've got what we need. But Romano was already moving, his earlier charm replaced by lethal calculation. Thompson's been asking very specific questions about our financial structure. Questions that sound suspiciously like someone building a federal case. Tyson maintained his slouched posture, but Jimmy could see him shifting weight to his front foot, a fighter's preparation for explosive movement. Just trying to understand the business, Mr. Romano. The business. Romano laughed, coldly, pressing a button on his desk. Marcus, bring the scanner. Walsh appeared instantly, carrying a device that looked like an airport metal detector. Jimmy's heart hammered against his ribs as he realized their cover was blown. Standard security procedure, Romano explained with mock politeness. Amazing. What technology can find these days? Hidden cameras, recording devices, federal surveillance equipment. The scanner's shrill beeping filled the office as Walsh ran it over Jimmy's jacket, immediately locating Santos' carefully concealed recording devices. Within seconds, tiny cameras and microphones lay exposed on Romano's desk like electronic evidence of their betrayal. Detective Santos, I presume. Romano spoke directly into one of the devices. Listening from your surveillance van? Tell her she's welcome to stay for the evening's entertainment. Walsh moved to skin Tyson, but Romano held up a restraining hand. No need, Marcus. I know exactly who Mr. Thompson really is. The office fell silent except for the distant sounds of the crowd beyond the walls. Romano walked slowly around his desk, savoring his moment of complete control. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize Iron Mike Tyson? Romano's voice carried genuine amusement. Different clothes, different posture, but impossible to disguise that legendary presence. I've been a boxing fan my entire life. Tyson straightened, slowly, abandoning his defeated persona as his true identity was exposed. Then you know what you're dealing with. Indeed I do. A has-been champion trying to play federal informant. Romano's smile was arctic. How disappointed your fans would be to learn their hero works with the police to entrap desperate businessmen. Security doors slammed shut around the office as armed men filled the warehouse beyond. Through the windows, Jimmy could see metal barriers sliding into place around the fighting ring, transforming it from entertainment venue to execution chamber. Romano spoke into his microphone with theatrical flair. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's main event has changed. We have two men who attempted to deceive us, to betray the trust of our organization. Let's show them what happens to informants and traitors. Marcus Walsh removed his suit jacket, revealing massive shoulders covered in prison tattoos and scars from countless fights. His smile promised pain beyond imagination. Punishment match, Romano announced. No rules, no mercy, no time limits. They fight until they can't fight anymore. The crowd's roar echoed through the warehouse as Jimmy and Tyson were herded toward the ring at gunpoint. Through the soundproof glass, Detective Santos' surveillance van sat helplessly in the parking lot. Unable to intervene without risking a massacre, Romano's final words followed them toward the ring. Welcome to the real underground, gentlemen. Tonight, legends die. Romano's men moved to restrain them, but Mike Tyson had spent 30 years in combat sports where hesitation meant unconsciousness. As the first security guard reached for his arm, Iron Mike exploded into the devastating fury that had once terrorized heavyweight boxing. His right uppercut caught the guard under the jaw with a sound like thunder, lifting the man completely off his feet before gravity slammed him into the concrete floor. The second man barely had time to register his partner's destruction before Tyson's left hook crashed into his temple, spinning him like a broken toy. But Romano hadn't hired street thugs. These were trained fighters, former military and law enforcement officers who understood violence professionally. They came at Tyson in coordinated waves, using the warehouse's confined space to limit his movement. Tyson's legendary peekaboo style made him nearly untouchable as he weaved between attackers, his head movement so fluid it seemed supernatural. A former boxer's right hand whistled past his ear, while Tyson's counterpunch shattered the man's ribs. An ex-Marine's takedown attempt met Tyson's sprawl and a devastating knee that ended the fight instantly. Jimmy battled his own group of attackers, his military combat training serving him well against Romano's soldiers. But even combined, they faced impossible odds. 8 professional fighters closing in with methodical precision. The warehouse erupted in chaos as spectators fled toward exits that Romano's security had already sealed. Camera equipment crashed to the floor, expensive suits scattered like frightened birds, and the air filled with screams of panic and pain. Tyson used everything available as weapons. A broken chair leg became a club that dropped 2 men, Equipment cables became whips that wrapped around necks and ankles. His ring intelligence showed as he manipulated positioning, forcing Romano's men to fight each other while pursuing him through the maze of overturned tables. But superior numbers began telling. A lucky punch caught Tyson on the temple, staggering him long enough for 3 men to grab his arms. Jimmy found himself cornered near Romano's office, bleeding from cuts over both eyes as 4 attackers closed in for the kill. Romano watched the carnage with satisfied smile, speaking into his microphone. "This is what happens to those who betray. Vincent Romano. Let this be a lesson." His words were cut off by the warehouse's fire alarm system exploding into deafening life. Emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red as sprinkler systems activated, soaking fighters and spectators alike. Through the smoke and chaos, a small figure appeared in the crowd, Bobby Martinez, having somehow infiltrated Romano's supposedly secure venue. The 12-year-old held a fire axe he'd used to smash the alarm system, his young face set with determination that would have made his Marine father proud. The distraction was exactly what Tyson needed to break free from his captors and surge toward Jimmy's position. Bobby's brave intervention gave Tyson the opening he needed to reach Jimmy's side, but police sirens wailing in the distance meant Romano's time was running out. The crime boss began barking orders for evidence destruction while his remaining men tried to contain 2 of the most dangerous fighters they'd ever faced. Back to back, Tyson growled, blood streaming from a cut above his left eye as he positioned himself against Jimmy. They fought like warriors from different eras united by common cause, Tyson's boxing precision complementing Jimmy's military ruthlessness. Every combination told a story of experience and skill that Romano's hired thugs couldn't match despite their numbers. Detective Santos' voice crackled through the warehouse's public address system, her words carrying the authority of federal law enforcement. "This is LVPD. The building is surrounded. Release your hostages immediately." Romano's composure finally cracked as he realized his empire was collapsing around him. "Destroy everything," he screamed at his remaining loyal soldiers. "Hard drives, financial records, client lists, burn it all." But his men were too busy fighting for their lives against Tyson and Jimmy to obey. The legendary boxer had found his rhythm now, his combinations flowing like deadly poetry. A 3-punch sequence dropped one attacker, while his defensive footwork made him untouchable to the others. Jimmy used his military training to maximum effect, employing joint locks and pressure point strikes that his Marine instructors had drilled into him years ago. When one of Romano's men pulled a knife, Jimmy disarmed him with a technique that would have made his drill sergeants proud. The warehouse's main doors exploded inward as SWAT officers flooded the building, their tactical lights cutting through the smoke and chaos. Romano's spectators surrendered immediately, their expensive clothing and terrified faces making them easy to distinguish from the combatants. "Gun!" Jimmy shouted, spotting Romano pulling a chrome pistol from his desk drawer. The crime boss aimed directly at Jimmy's back as the Marine fought 2 men near the ring. Tyson saw the threat and launched himself across 15 feet of warehouse floor, but he was too far away to intercede. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like a cannon blast, but Detective Santos had fired first from the main entrance, her bullet striking Romano's pistol and sending it skittering across the concrete floor. SWAT officers immediately tackled the crime boss, their professional efficiency ending his resistance in seconds. Romano screamed threats and promises of revenge as steel handcuffs locked around his wrists, but his voice was lost in the chaos of arrests and evidence collection. Bobby ran to his father through the diminishing smoke, his small arms wrapping around Jimmy's waist as if he'd never let go. The boy had risked everything to save his family, displaying courage that would have impressed any Marine unit commander. "You okay, Dad?" Jimmy hugged his son tightly, hardly believing they'd all survived Romano's trap. But one threat remained. Marcus, the butcher, Walsh still stood in the ring, waiting. Through the smoke and flashing emergency lights, Marcus, the butcher, Walsh stood alone in the fighting ring like some medieval executioner awaiting his final victim. His massive frame cast shadows across the bloodstained canvas as police processed Romano's operation around him. "This ain't over, Martinez," Walsh called out, his voice carrying across the warehouse chaos. "You and me still got business." Jimmy approached the ring despite Tyson's restraining hand, knowing that some confrontations couldn't be avoided. Walsh was Romano's most dangerous enforcer, the man who'd made fighters disappear when they tried to leave the organization. "Your boss is finished," Jimmy said, stepping through the ropes. "You don't have to do this." "Yeah, I do." Walsh's scarred hands formed fists like sledgehammers. "Romano's got pictures of my little girl, recordings of conversations. I don't finish you. She pays the price." The revelation hit Jimmy like a physical blow. Walsh wasn't Romano's willing enforcer. He was another trapped father, another victim of the crime boss's system of leverage and fear. "I got kids too," Walsh continued, his voice breaking slightly. 7-year-old daughter with leukemia. Romano pays for her treatments as long as I do what he wants. Around the warehouse, SWAT officers were securing Romano's remaining men, but they held back from the ring, sensing this confrontation needed to play out between the two fighters. Walsh attacked with desperate fury, his massive fists seeking to end the fight quickly. But as they grappled in the center of the ring, Jimmy could see the tears in the bigger man's eyes. This wasn't hatred. This was terror for his child's safety. "What's your daughter's name?" Jimmy asked, dodging a wild haymaker. "Emma," Walsh sobbed, his emotional breakdown making his attacks sloppy and predictable. "She's all I got left since her mother died." Instead of pressing his advantage, Jimmy stepped back and lowered his hands. "My boy's name is Bobby. He's 12, loves martial arts, wants to be strong like his old man." The gesture of mercy broke something inside Walsh. The giant fighter collapsed to his knees in the center of the ring, his massive shoulders shaking with the weight of months of forced violence. "I'm sorry," Walsh whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything I've done. But she's just a baby, and Romano said he'd hurt her if I didn't." "Hey." Jimmy knelt beside him, placing a hand on Walsh's shoulder. "We're both just fathers trying to protect our kids. That doesn't make us enemies." Walsh looked up with desperate hope. "You think the cops will understand?" "About Emma. About why I had to." "Detective Santos," Jimmy called out. "We need to talk about protective custody for a little girl named Emma Walsh." Across the warehouse, Detective Santos nodded grimly, already understanding the implications. Romano's system of leverage extended far beyond simple criminal conspiracy. It was family terrorism disguised as business. Walsh stood slowly, extending his hand to Jimmy with something approaching gratitude. "Thank you, brother, for showing mercy when you could have finished it." The two fathers shook hands in the center of the ring, both understanding they'd been victims of the same evil system. Vincent Romano sat in Detective Santos' interrogation chair, his expensive suit torn and his silver hair disheveled, but his cold arrogance remained intact. Even in federal custody, facing decades in prison, he maintained the predatory confidence that had built his criminal empire. "This won't stick," Romano said, adjusting his torn cuffs with practiced calm. "My lawyers will have me out within 48 hours. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Mike Tyson entered the room with Detective Santos, his legendary presence seeming to fill every corner of the small space. Romano's composure flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Iron Mike Tyson," Romano smiled coldly. "Still, playing hero at your age? How pathetic." "Just wanted to look you in the eye," Tyson replied quietly, taking a seat across from the crime boss. "See what kind of man threatens children to control their fathers. Business is business. Leverage is simply good management practice." Santos spread evidence photos across the metal table, financial records, client communications, and video footage from multiple underground venues. "Your business generated over $10 million in illegal gambling revenue. We've identified operations in 5 states and connections to international human trafficking." Romano barely glanced at the evidence. "Circumstantial at best. You'll never prove direct involvement." "We don't have to," Santos smiled, producing a tablet computer. "Your own. Security cameras recorded everything, including your confession about making fighters disappear." For the first time, Romano's confidence wavered as he watched himself on video, explaining his operation's scope to Jimmy and Tyson while believing them to be potential assets. "My family has connections," Romano said, desperation creeping into his voice. "People who won't let this stand. You have no idea the forces you're dealing with." Tyson leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes holding Romano's gaze with unbreakable intensity. Your family? Look around. You've been destroying families, using children as leverage, turning good men into criminals to pay medical bills. I provided opportunities. You provided misery. Tyson interrupted. That ends now. Romano's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the petty criminal beneath the sophisticated exterior. This won't end here, Tyson. My people will find your Marine friend, his sick wife, that brat kid of his. They'll pay for what you've done to me. The threat hung in the air like poison. Detective Santos started to intervene, but Tyson held up a restraining hand. You just threatened a child, Tyson said, his voice carrying the deadly calm that had once terrified heavyweight contenders. In front of a federal officer. On camera, Romano realized his mistake too late, his face going pale, as he understood what he'd just confessed to. Detective Santos, Tyson continued, never breaking eye contact with Romano. I believe threatening witnesses and their families adds additional federal charges. Multiple additional charges, Santos confirmed, making notes on her legal pad. Tyson stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across Romano's suddenly diminished figure. You made one mistake, Romano. You thought this was about money, about leverage, about power. He paused at the door, looking back with something approaching pity. This was about family, and you just lost. The interrogation room door closed with finality, leaving Romano alone with the weight of his crimes and the certainty of justice. Finally served. 2 weeks after Romano's arrest, Jimmy sat in University Medical Center's surgical waiting room, his hands clasped tightly as he watched the clock above the reception desk. Linda had been in surgery for 3 hours, the experimental treatment that could save her life, finally within reach thanks to Mike Tyson's foundation covering the $25,000 cost. Bobby dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside him, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster their family had endured. The boy had shown incredible courage in that warehouse, but Jimmy still felt sick thinking about the danger he'd exposed his son to. Dad. Bobby stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Any word yet? Not yet, son. Doctor said it could take another hour. The waiting room's television played news coverage of Romano's arrest, calling it the largest underground fighting bust in Nevada history. 17 fighters had been freed from contracts they couldn't escape, and evidence was already leading to arrests in 4 other states. Mr. Martinez? Detective Santos approached with coffee and a manila folder, her professional demeanor softened by genuine concern. How's Linda doing? Still waiting, Jimmy replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. What's that folder? Good news, actually. Romano's computers contained financial records going back 5 years. We've recovered over $2 million in illegal proceeds that will be returned to his victims' families. Jimmy shook his head in amazement. What about Tommy Walsh? Cooperating fully with federal prosecutors. His daughter Emma is in protective custody and receiving the best medical care available. He's looking at reduced charges in exchange for testimony. The surgical doors opened, and Dr. Chun emerged with a tired but satisfied expression. Jimmy jumped to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs. The surgery was completely successful, she announced with a smile. The experimental treatment is already showing positive results. Linda's prognosis has improved dramatically. Jimmy felt his legs go weak with relief. Bobby whooped with joy and hugged Detective Santos, who seemed surprised but pleased by the boy's enthusiasm. That an hour later, they were reunited in Linda's recovery room. She looked pale but peaceful, her breathing steady and strong for the first time in months. How are my boys? She whispered, reaching for their hands. We're good, Mom, Bobby said, his voice thick with emotion. Really good. Mike Tyson appeared in the doorway, carrying flowers and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who'd seen justice served. Room for one more visitor. Always, Linda smiled. Thank you, Mike, for everything. Your husband's got the skills to be something special in legitimate competition, Tyson said, pulling up a chair. I've arranged meetings with 3 promoters who run veteran benefit programs. Real fights, proper medical supervision, good money. Jimmy felt hope. Real, honest hope, for the first time in months. You really think I could make it work? I know you can, Tyson replied firmly. You're a real fighter now, Jimmy. Time to do it the right way. 3 months later, The crowd at Caesar's Palace Sportsbook buzzed with anticipation as Jimmy Martinez prepared for his first sanctioned amateur boxing match. The event was part of a veterans benefit program, with proceeds supporting military families facing medical crises. Families just like his own had been to eye in the dressing room. Jimmy wrapped his hands with the ritual precision Tyson had taught him, each movement deliberate and calming. The legitimate boxing gear felt different. From the underground fighting equipment, cleaner somehow, unmarked by the corruption that had nearly destroyed his family. "Remember what we worked on," Tyson said, checking the hand wraps. "He's got reach on you, but your footwork is better. Stay inside. Work the body. Make him fight your fight." Bobby sat nearby in his best clothes, practically vibrating with excitement at seeing his father compete legally for the first time. In the stands, Linda waited with Detective Santos, both women healthy and strong. Linda's cancer in complete remission, Santos having been promoted to lieutenant for her work dismantling Romano's network. The opponent was respectful and skilled. A former Army sergeant fighting for similar reasons, trying to earn legitimate money to support his family. The contrast with Romano's brutal spectacles couldn't have been greater. The fight showcased Jimmy's improved technique under Tyson's training, but his opponent's superior amateur experience showed in the later rounds. When the decision was announced, Jimmy had lost by a narrow margin, but the crowd gave him a standing ovation that felt like victory. "Hell of a fight," Martinez, his opponent said, embracing him in the ring. "You've got real heart." Afterward, 3 different promoters approached with offers for future bouts and potential sponsorship deals. The money wouldn't make them rich, but it would provide steady income while Jimmy built his legitimate fighting career in a federal prison in Colorado. Vincent Romano watched the fight on his cell's small television, his empire completely dismantled, and his threats revealed as empty bluster. 17 other prisoners, former associates arrested in the nationwide sweep, shared his cell block, their organized crime network reduced to memories and regret. As the arena emptied, Jimmy stood in the ring with Linda and Bobby, holding their hands high in a gesture of true victory. He'd lost the fight but won something far more valuable: his family's safety, his own integrity, and the knowledge that strength used righteously always triumphs over corruption. Mike Tyson watched from ringside with satisfaction, knowing he'd helped transform a desperate man into a genuine champion. "That's what real fighting looks like," he told the reporter interviewing him. "Good men protecting their families with honor intact." The camera captured Jimmy's family celebrating in the ring, 3 people who'd survived the darkness and found their way back to the light. 6 months after the warehouse incident, Bobby Martinez stood at the entrance of what had once been Steele's elite MMA academy. The building looked completely transformed. Fresh paint covered the walls, new equipment gleamed under bright lights, and a banner above the entrance read, "Martinez Family Training Center." "Nervous?" asked Mike Tyson, adjusting Bobby's tournament GI with the careful attention of a grandfather preparing his grandson for something important. "A little," Bobby admitted, though his posture showed none of the fearful slouch that had once defined him. "But good nervous. Like I'm ready for whatever happens." The gym bustled with activity as families arrived for Bobby's first youth martial arts tournament. Jimmy, now part owner alongside Tyson, greeted parents and explained their philosophy of respect, discipline, and family values. His amateur boxing record stood at 12-3, with legitimate sponsorships covering Linda's ongoing medical maintenance and providing steady income. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Tommy Walsh from the center mat, his commanding voice carrying across the gym. The former enforcer had transformed into a legitimate trainer, his past experiences giving him unique insight into helping troubled youth avoid the mistakes he'd made. "Welcome to our inaugural youth tournament." Bobby's division included 8 competitors, but his real opponent was the memory of the frightened boy who'd been slapped in this very building. As he moved through his preliminary matches, Bobby demonstrated not just improved technique, but genuine leadership, encouraging younger students and showing respect for every opponent. The finals matched Bobby against Marcus Chun, a slightly older boy whose arrogant attitude reminded everyone of Derek Vaughn's toxic approach. Chun talked trash between rounds and dismissed Bobby as just another wannabe. But Bobby had learned from the best teachers in the world. His footwork flowed like water, his defensive techniques frustrated Chin's aggressive attacks, and his counterstrikes carried the precision Tyson had drilled into him through countless training sessions. The match ended with Bobby's victory, but, more importantly, he helped Chin to his feet and offered genuine congratulations on his techniques. The gesture of sportsmanship earned applause from the crowd and a nod of approval from his teachers. During the awards ceremony, Bobby spotted a nervous young girl near the entrance, maybe 10 years old, wearing ill-fitting gear and looking exactly like he had months ago. Her father, a man with the bearing of military service, watched anxiously from nearby. After receiving his trophy, Bobby walked directly to the girl. "First time?" he asked gently. She nodded, unable to find her voice. "I was scared my first time, too," Bobby confided. "But you know what I learned? Being scared just means you're about to do something brave." He spent the next 10 minutes showing her basic stances and breathing techniques, his natural teaching ability emerging as he helped another frightened child find confidence. Jimmy and Linda watched their son's kindness with pride that had nothing to do with winning tournaments and everything to do with character. "He's going to be something special," Tyson observed, recognizing true champion qualities that transcended physical skill. Bobby Martinez had found his calling, not just as a martial artist, but as someone who lifts others up. 1 year after Vincent Romano's arrest, the Martinez Family Training Center hosted its first annual Heroes Foundation tournament. The gym was packed beyond capacity, with fighters of all ages representing everything their community had built together: respect, family, and second chances. Linda Martinez coordinated the event with the efficiency of someone who'd found her calling and helping others. Cancer-free for 8 months, she worked tirelessly organizing fundraising for military families and medical research, her personal experience giving her unique empathy for families facing impossible choices. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced from the microphone, "this tournament has raised over $50,000 for families in crisis." The crowd erupted in applause as Jimmy Martinez entered the exhibition ring, his amateur record now 19-7. With 3 major sponsorships and a growing reputation in legitimate boxing circles. But today he wasn't fighting. He was refereeing youth matches, his experience and wisdom helping young fighters learn proper techniques and sportsmanship. Bobby, now 13 and visibly more confident, demonstrated advanced techniques with other students. His natural leadership had developed into genuine teaching ability, and several younger children looked up to him as a mentor and friend. Mike Tyson, officially listed as gym co-owner and head trainer, watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. The legendary fighter had discovered that building champions was even more fulfilling than being one, and his reputation drew families from across Nevada seeking legitimate martial arts training. "Mr. Mike," called a small voice from the crowd. A shy young girl approached, Sarah Patterson, whose father was deployed with the army in Eastern Europe. Her mother worked double shifts to pay bills, and Sarah often came to the gym after school, finding family among the fighters and trainers. "My dad's a soldier," she told Tyson proudly, just as Bobby had once proclaimed his father's Marine service. "Soldiers are the best," Bobby said, kneeling beside her with a gentle smile. "My dad taught me that protecting your family is what makes you really strong." The moment crystallized everything they'd built together. A community where strength meant protection, where experience guided youth, and where family extended beyond blood relationships to include anyone willing to stand up for what's right. Detective Lieutenant Maria Santos arrived with her own children, both enrolled in the gym's youth programs. The successful prosecution of Romano's network had made her a hero in law enforcement circles, but she found greater satisfaction watching her kids learn confidence and discipline. As the tournament concluded, Tyson gathered everyone for a final ceremony beneath the gym's mission statement: strength through honor, victory through respect, champions through family. Below the statement hung a photo from Bobby's first day at the original gym, with Tyson's handwritten note: "Every champion starts with a single step forward." The image captured everything: a frightened boy who'd found courage, a desperate father who'd discovered honor, a community that had chosen family over profit, and a legend who'd proven that true champions never stop fighting for what matters. In the photo's reflection, Bobby could see himself teaching Sarah basic techniques, the cycle of mentorship continuing as it should. Champions creating champions, one brave step at a time. That if you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.